Hi, I'm Zhongzai. Today, we're looking at the CFMOTO 450cc AMT, currently the brand's only automatic motorbike. Actually, many domestic manufacturers are now making this type of AMT or CVT automatic cruiser motorcycle. However, each company's tuning is different. From my riding experience, I feel the CFMOTO bike is probably the most sportily tuned among them. So, how does it perform specifically? Let's discuss it in detail in the video. Alright, as usual, let's start with the static riding position. I'm 1.78 meters tall and weigh 68 kilograms. The bike's relevant specifications are on screen, in the bottom left. Right, sitting on it, height-wise there's no problem whatsoever. My feet are both completely flat on the ground and it feels very relaxed. Look at my knee angle. Absolutely no pressure. Then, for the upper body, because the handlebars extend backwards a bit, the posture is actually very close to your body. And you can actually adjust this angle higher or lower according to your own height. Then, the position of the foot pegs is mid-forward. It's not like many cruisers where they are very far forward, which can be a bit tiring. This one has them in a more moderate position. It has that cruiser style, that feeling, that atmosphere is there. But relatively speaking, it's not so far forward that it's strenuous. It's a posture that captures the right vibe. Relaxed, comfortable riding. Cruisers often need to carry a passenger, so let's experience the pillion seat. This pillion seat, consistent with CFMOTO style, is a bit harder than the front seat, so, sitting on it, your backside feels relatively less comfortable than when sitting at the front. Moreover, its overall length, although it looks quite long, is actually raised in the middle. The surface area you're in contact with isn't that large, so when you sit on it, you feel a bit of a gap behind your tailbone. So, like this, with the foot pegs being quite high, it doesn't feel very secure sitting on it. You lack a bit of a sense of security. It would be best to add a backrest here, which would be more friendly for the pillion passenger. Next, let's take a general look at the bike styling. There aren't any major changes to its overall appearance. It's still a very beautiful, classic cruiser style. Let's first focus on the differences between this and the regular manual shift version. It's this middle section here. As you can see, there's a fluid reservoir here, right? Normally, this is where the clutch would be. Unless you're looking at something like a Ducati with a hydraulic clutch, which has a reservoir. But now, the brake has been integrated up here. So this position is actually its rear brake, and over here is still the conventional front brake. Correspondingly, down here, you can see the gear lever has been removed. And then over here on the right side, because the brake has been moved up, the brake lever down here has also been removed accordingly. And this position here is the entire AMT gear shifting mechanism. Essentially, an AMT is a manual gearbox with an added computer that controls the automatic shifting for you, so it doesn't require too many modifications to the original structure. You just need to add a controller right here to manage the gearbox shifting. Then there's this position here. Take a look. This upper part here, the operation hasn't changed. It's this area. There are a few buttons here. D, M, and S. The D/M button is for switching between automatic and manual. D is automatic, M is manual. S is also an automatic gear, similar to D, but it's the sport mode, so its gear shifting logic is a bit different. Over here are your gear up/down controls for manual mode. You press this to shift down, and if you press the front one, here, it will shift up. This should be the parking brake. It should lock your rear brake. After the rear brake is locked, when you park on a slope, it won't roll away easily. These are the main differences between this bike and its standard version. However, many of you might be encountering the 450cc model for the first time, so let's give you a general overview of its overall appearance and detailed configuration. First is the front headlight. It's a round, retro-style headlight, but because it has many LEDs and lenses inside, it actually looks quite high-tech and refined. The indicators on the left and right sides also look very retro, but they actually have LED bulbs inside. Let's turn them on and have a look. It's also something that looks very retro, but it's actually a full-color TFT-LCD display, a very high-tech instrument panel. So CFMOTO really likes to keep the major styling aspects, like the rear view mirrors and so on, looking very retro. But in many areas where technology can be updated, they've given you new things, including this inverted front fork. The support from this inverted front fork is very good. However, because the inverted front fork doesn't quite fit the style, they've added a cover at the front to block the silver part, making the bike look at first glance like it has a very thick, conventional front fork, but it actually doesn't. Looking from a distance, areas like this use a metal CNC cutting process. It feels like a spoked wool hub. It has a very retro feel, but when you take a closer look, it's actually made of aluminium alloy. Stunning paintwork. Its brake lights and indicators are integrated, so you won't see a separate brake light. This red ring is the brake light, with the yellow indicators flashing in the center. At the back is a single-sided dual-exit exhaust. Actually, I think if there were aftermarket parts available to give it dual-sided, dual-exit chrome exhausts, then its British classic style would be even more pronounced. The overall frame and engine of this bike, I don't think I need to introduce them in detail, as everyone is very familiar with them. The main frame and engine are the same as those on the 450SR and 450NK. So, at its core, this bike has a sporty character. It's just that its rear shock absorber linkage and its rear subframe have been tuned for cruiser adaptability. However, that doesn't affect the bike's excellent core handling. We'll discuss the specifics when we're actually riding. The feeling of riding the CFMOTO 450 can, I think, be divided into two main parts. One part is how this gearbox compares to other companies' AME or CV systems. We'll focus on that part. The other aspect is its handling and comfort. In this regard, it's quite similar to the standard manual version, but since many of you might be new to this model, we'll briefly discuss it too. First, let's discuss how to choose between the AMT and CVT versions. An AMT is essentially a manual gearbox with an added external computer that selects the appropriate gear by monitoring your throttle position and engine speed. Its advantages are high transmission efficiency and low cost, making it ideal for smaller, entry-level cars. The disadvantage is it needs expert manufacturer tuning. Poorly tuned, it can suffer from jerkiness, slow shifts, and power gaps. You can just think of the CVT as a scooter gearbox. The benefit is it's gearless, so there's no lurching and power delivery is exceptionally smooth. But transmission efficiency is low, with significant power loss. Fuel consumption is also often high, and its scooter-like belt drive needs regular maintenance. If the belt snaps, the bike will break down. During its promotion, CFMOTO's M was highlighted for its fast gear changes. Compared to other AMT models I've ridden, the gear changes on the CFMOTO are indeed noticeably faster. They're very crisp and clean, although you can still feel the power interruption and the gear engaging due to the gearbox's design. It's only for an instant. In this respect, the speed is already very close to that of a manual gear change by an experienced rider. This is a huge advantage for new riders, as many of them struggle to get the hang of changing gears. Then there's the gear shifting logic. It has 3 modes: manual, automatic, and sport. In manual mode, you need to manually engage first gear to get going. It's not like a scooter where you can rev the engine in neutral without the bike moving. Once you're moving, you can't just upshift to any gear you want. It has to correspond with the engine speed. For example, at around 3000 RPM, the highest gear you can select is 3rd. You won't be able to shift into 4th unless you increase the revs to over 4000 RPM. But if your revs drop too low, for example, you're in 3rd at 3000 RPM, then suddenly brake and the revs fall to just over 1000, the gearbox will automatically drop to 1st. This ensures you have enough torque to set off again. The logic itself is fine, it just helps beginners. Both D and S modes are essentially automatic. Once you're in gear and riding, the system monitors the engine speed and throttle position to upshift or downshift automatically. However, the control logic for these two modes is quite different. In D mode, the clutch engagement is gentler, which means the jolt and jerkiness of the gear change will be less pronounced. It will then upshift at around 3000 RPM. Overall, it's a very comfortable and smooth setup. When you switch to S mode, the gearbox will allow you to rev past 4500 RPM before upshifting. This means you have a higher rev range to play with for a more dynamic power delivery. However, the downside is that compared to D mode, the jolt from the gear change, that momentary thud, is a bit more noticeable. However, the interval between shifts is also shorter, meaning the gear changes are faster. Whether you want to ride more aggressively or prefer a calm and steady approach depends on your riding style. However, there's one point I want to mention here. On this bike, or rather on all AMT models, when you roll off the throttle in first gear, there's noticeable engine braking. And in that instant when you apply throttle and the power engages, there's a jolt. This is because the AMT gearbox itself is an evolution of the manual gearbox structure. CFMOTO's solution is to make the clutch engagement and gear shifting efficiency as fast as possible, shortening the process as much as they can. This has certainly had an effect. And thanks to the engine's already excellent vibration control, when compared to AMTs from other manufacturers, this bike does feel more comfortable and smoother. Finally, regarding the bike's handling, you can just think of it as a naked bike with cruiser styling. It handles very smoothly and is easy to ride. When changing lanes or even cornering on a track, the bike is completely responsive. The suspension has a firm setup, allowing it to grip the road securely. Although it's not as aggressive as a sports model, it still outperforms most cruisers and even some retro naked bikes. However, this also means that when you go over bumps, your body will clearly feel the undulations transmitted from the road surface. Comfort is slightly compromised. I'd suggest upgrading the rear shock absorber to fix it. To sum up, I can say that this CFMOTO 450cc is the sportiest automatic cruiser you can currently buy. On one hand, it's because the bike itself has well-tuned handling and excellent engine performance. The gearbox's shifting logic also plays a part. Its S mode retains a certain sportiness, and the gear changes are impressively clean and crisp. So, if you're a beginner looking to buy a cruiser, but you also want some good handling and riding enjoyment, I think you should go and test ride this bike.